The Dralethian warship Molten will hung in the void like a jagged shard of a dying star, its angular hull bathed in the bloody glow of the system's red giant. The vessel was a fortress of dark metal and molten conduits, its segmented armor plates shifting like the scales of some great predator. Orange-red plasma pulsed through its veins, casting flickering shadows across the command deck where Commander Draltal stood, his four-fingered hands clasped behind his back. The humans had come to them as refugees, a pitiful sight, their ships rounded, smooth, lacking the brutalist efficiency of Dralethian engineering. Their vessels were scarred from battle, their hulls patched with crude welds and makeshift plating. They drifted now in formation before the molten will, their energy signatures weak, their weapons cold. A defeated people, Draltal's mandibles twitched in quiet disdain. The humans had been driven from their homeworld by the Krixis Swarm, a ravenous tide of biomechanical horrors that had consumed half the Orion arm. The Dralethian High Command had debated for weeks whether to grant them asylum. Some argued it was a waste of resources. Others whispered that the humans, for all their primitiveness, had fought the swarm longer than any other species. A curiosity, nothing more. "Scan them again," Draltal rumbled, his voice a deep vibration in the dense atmosphere of the command deck. Vashdor, the ship's chief scientist, tapped at his console, the orange glow of the holographic display reflecting off his copper-accented carapace. "No changes, Commander. Their reactors are at minimal output. Their weapon systems are either damaged or powered down. Their life support is barely functional." He hesitated. "They are not a threat." Draltal exhaled through his secondary vents. "Then why do they unsettle me?" It wasn't their technology. The Dralethians had seen weaker species before. It wasn't their desperation. That was expected. No, it was something in the way their ships held formation, the precision of their approach vectors, the silence of their transmissions. They were not pleading. They were waiting. On the bridge of the human flagship Perseverance, Colonel Teyla Webb watched the Dralethian warship through the reinforced viewport. Her fingers traced the edge of her command console, feeling the faint vibrations of the ship's failing systems. "They're scanning us again," Captain Stephen Foster murmured from the tactical station. His voice was calm, but his knuckles were white where they gripped the edge of his display. "Let them," Teyla said. The Perseverance was a ghost of what it had once been. Its armor was scorched, its decks half-lit by emergency power. The crew moved in silence, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow. They had been running for months, fighting when they had to, dying when they couldn't, and now they were here. Not to beg, not to surrender, but to offer. Teyla turned to the comms officer. "Open a channel." The officer hesitated. "Colonel, if they see what we're carrying, they won't understand it," Teyla said softly. "Not yet." The channel hissed to life. On the molten will, the comms officer stiffened. "Commander, the humans are hailing us." Draltal's spines flexed in surprise. He had expected pleading, bargaining, not this quiet certainty. "Put them through." The holodisplay flickered, resolving into the image of a human female. Her face was lined with exhaustion, her uniform frayed at the edges, but her eyes burned. "Commander Draltal," she said, her voice steady. "I am Colonel Teyla Webb of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We request sanctuary." Draltal studied her. "You are in no position to request anything, Colonel." A faint smile touched her lips. "No, we're not." She turned slightly, nodding to someone off. "Screen." Then the Perseverance's cargo bays opened. Vashdor's sensors screamed. "Commander," Draltal's blood ran cold as the data flooded in. The human ship wasn't just carrying refugees. It was carrying weapons. Not just any weapons. Their weapons, dozens of Krixis war machines, torn from the battlefield, their biomechanical husks locked in stasis fields. Some were intact, some were in pieces. All of them had been studied, and beside them, in rows upon rows of reinforced containment, were human soldiers, not broken, not defeated. Draltal's secondary heart stuttered. The humans hadn't come to beg for shelter. They had come to offer the Dralethians the only thing that could save them, the knowledge of how to fight, and the soldiers who had learned to do it. Section Fe, Sanctuary Protocol, the command deck of the Iron Resolve, was silent. Not the disciplined quiet of a Dralethian warship at battle stations, but the stunned, breathless silence of a predator realizing it had stepped into a trap. Draltal's claws flexed against the armrests of his command throne, the dark metal groaning under the pressure. His secondary heart thrummed in his chest, a rapid, discordant rhythm that betrayed the cold dread coiling through his veins. The human warship, Perseverance, they called it, hung in the void before them, its battered hull still radiating the scars of a war the Dralethians had thought unwinnable. And yet, it had not just survived. It had learned. Vashdor's voice crackled over the comm. The scientist's usual measured tones frayed at the edges. Commander, the stasis signatures. They're not just preserving the Krixis war machines. They're dissecting them, reverse engineering them. Draltal's gaze flicked to the holographic feed. The human containment units were lined in perfect militaristic rows, each one holding a Krixis husk, some still twitching with residual synaptic impulses, others stripped down to skeletal frameworks, their biomechanical organs exposed like specimens in a lab. And beside them, not the cowed, desperate refugees the Dralethians had expected. These were soldiers, armored in hybridized plating, their gear a grotesque fusion of human alloys and Krixis chitin. Some bore cybernetic augmentations, limbs reforged from scavenged enemy tech. Others had implants burrowed into their skulls, neural interfaces flickering with the same eerie bioluminescence as the Krixis' own nerve clusters. They had not just fought the monsters, they had stolen from them. Draltal's mandibles tightened. The Krixis were a scourge, a hive mind of biomechanical horrors that had consumed entire systems. The Dralethian Empire had thrown fleets against them, lost worlds to them. Their greatest forges had been reduced to molten slag, their strongest warriors torn apart and repurposed into new abominations. And yet these humans, these primitives, had not just survived contact, they had adapted. Colonel Teyla Webb's image remained steady on the view screen, her expression unreadable. She was waiting, not for permission, not for mercy, for recognition. Draltal exhaled through his secondary vents, the heat of his breath laced with the acrid tang of disbelief. You boarded them. It wasn't a question. Webb's lips twitched. We did, a beat. Then, the word landed like a plasma round. Draltal's neural interface flared, his tactical subroutines scrambling to process the implications. Boarding a Krixis vessel was suicide. Their ships were living organisms, their corridors lined with reactive tissue that dissolved intruders on contact. Their warriors didn't bleed. They reconfigured, shifting forms mid-combat, their bodies rewriting their own biology in real time. And the humans had not only boarded them, they had taken prisoners. Vashdor's voice cut through the silence. The scientist's usual clinical detachment shattered. Commander, their neural scans, the modifications. They've interfaced with Krixis systems, directly, voluntarily. Draltal's secondary heart skipped. The feed zoomed in on one of the human soldiers, Captain Stephen Foster. According to the data, sigils flickering beside his containment pod. His left arm was encased in Krixis-derived carapace, the chitin fused seamlessly with his flesh. His eyes, when they opened, glowed the same sickly amber as the enemy's. But he was still human, still aware. Draltal had seen what happened to those the Krixis assimilated. Their minds dissolved within hours, overwritten by the hive's collective will. This man had not broken, he had bargained. Webb's voice was quiet. We can show you how to do the same. The silence that followed was thicker than the void between stars. Draltal's claws retracted. His neural interface pulsed with the weight of the decision forming in his mind. The humans had not come to beg. They had come to teach, And for the first time in a century of war, the Dralethian Empire had something it had long since abandoned. He opened the fleet-wide channel. "Prepare for docking." The docking clamps shrieked as the human vessel Iron Resolve locked into the Dralethian battle carrier Ember of Vengeance. The sound was a violation, a foreign presence grinding against the sanctity of Dralethian steel. The air in the umbilical corridor tasted of scorched metal and ionized plasma, the scent of human technology bleeding into the sterile forge, heat of the Dralethian warship. Draltal stood at the threshold, his segmented armor plates shifting with the slow, measured rhythm of controlled unease. His neural feed pulsed with tactical overlays, thermal blooms, biometric spikes, the whisper of human-made machinery cycling through protocols his systems did not recognize. They had allowed them aboard. A mistake, perhaps, or salvation. The humans emerged from their ship, not as prisoners, not as supplicants, but as equals. Colonel Teyla Webb led them, her frame armored in matte, black composite plating, her helmet retracted to reveal a face that should have been soft by Dralethian standards. It was not. Her gaze was a blade honed by something deeper than war. Behind her, Captain Foster moved with the eerie precision of a thing half reclaimed from death. The Krixis carapace encasing his left arm pulsed faintly, its amber glow a blasphemy against the Dralethian forge, light. Yet his eyes, when they flicked to Draltal, were human, sharper than they had any right to be. "You're wondering if this is a trick," Webb said. "Not a question." Draltal's mandibles flexed. "You would." She didn't smile. "We would." The admission hung between them, a truth too jagged to dismiss. Vashdor, the Empire's foremost xenotech analyst, stepped forward, his copper, inlaid armor humming with suppressed scans. His voice was a grating rasp, filtered through his helm's vocoder. "The Krixis do not bargain, they consume." Foster's fingers twitched. The carapace responded, tendrils of chitin writhing beneath his skin before stilling. "Yeah, they do." He lifted his hybrid arm, the amber veins within it pulsing in time with his heartbeat. "But they're not the only ones who can change a body." Draltal's neural feed flared with warnings. The readings were impossible. The Krixis strain in Foster's system was active, alive, but it was not in control. It was contained. Webb saw his hesitation. "We don't just survive, Commander, we adapt." Then she did something no Dralethian had ever seen a human do. She reached out and placed her bare hand against the Ember of Vengeance's hull. The ship's systems shuddered. For half a breath, the forge, lights dimmed. The omnipresent thrum of Dralethian power cores stuttered, their rhythm disrupted by something ancient and alien whispering through the conduits. Vashdor's scanners shrieked. There in the systems, Draltal's claws, unsheathed on instinct, his combat protocol surging. And then it was over. The lights stabilized. The hum of the ship returned, unchanged. Webb withdrew her hand. Not an attack, a handshake. Draltal's neural interface reeled. The humans had touched the ship, not through brute force hacking, not through invasive code, but through something deeper, something biological. Vashdor's voice was hollow. "How?" Foster exhaled, the sound almost a laugh. "You ever hear of ghosts, Dralethian?" Draltal had not, but he was beginning to understand. The humans had not come with weapons, they had come with stories. And stories, it seemed, were the one thing the Krixis could not consume. Section Fe. The first lie, the observation deck of the Iron Resolve hummed with the low, molten pulse of Dralethian power cores, their orange-red glow casting jagged shadows across the reinforced bulkheads. Draltal stood motionless, his segmented armor plates shifting minutely as he processed what had just occurred. The humans had touched the ship, not with tools, not with machines, with themselves. Colonel Webb stood beside him, her posture relaxed in a way that made his neural interface prickle with unease. Humans did not carry themselves like warriors. not in any way Dralethian doctrine recognized. Their spines were too loose, their movements too fluid, as if violence was not a protocol to be activated, but a breath to be exhaled. Vashdor's data screens flickered, his copper-clawed fingers darting across the holographic interface. His ocular implants dilated, the lenses whirring as they recalibrated. The intrusion was non-digital, he murmured. His voice laced with something Draltal had never heard from him before, doubt. It bypassed firewalls entirely, like it recognized the ship as a living thing. Foster chuckled, the sound rough and warm. Closer than you think. Draltal's neural feed flared with warning sigils. This was not how infiltration worked, not how war worked. The Krixis consumed data, devoured systems. They did not whisper to machinery. Webb turned her head slightly, her dark eyes reflecting the forge, light like polished obsidian. You've studied our history, Commander, but you studied the wrong parts. A pause. The ship's ventilation cycled, the air thick with the scent of molten alloys and something else, something organic. Human sweat, salt and iron. You cataloged our weapons, Webb continued. Our ships, our tactics. But you never asked why we built them. Draltal's combat subroutines itched for activation. This was a distraction, a psychological ploy, yet Vashdor's screens flared crimson. The Krixis probes are adjusting trajectory. They've detected the anomaly. Foster's grin was sharp. Good. Let him look. Draltal's claws flexed. Explain. Webb exhaled, slow and deliberate. The first lie humanity ever told wasn't to an enemy. It was to ourselves. She tapped her temple. We looked at the dark between stars and said, I am not afraid, and then we made it true. The deck vibrated, not from engines, but from something deeper. The Iron Resolve's core pulsed in time with the human's breathing. Vashdor's voice was barely audible. They're rewriting the ship's resonance. Draltal's neural feed shorted for a single terrifying second, and in that silence, he heard it. Not in sound, not in data. In the metal itself, the Krixis probes shrieked as their scans rebounded, corrupted. The humans stood unmoving, their eyes alight with something older than fire. Draltal understood. Then, the stories were not metaphor. They were weapons, and the Iron Resolve was learning to sing. The song in the metal did not fade. Draltal's neural interface flickered again, his vision stuttering between the physical world and the data stream screaming through his implants. The Iron Resolve's hull thrummed, not with the mechanical pulse of engines or the crackle of plasma conduits, but with something deeper, something alive. The humans called it a song, but it was not music as the Dralethians understood it. It was vibration given intent, a resonance that curled through the ship's superstructure like blood through veins, threading into every bulkhead, every conduit, every seam of welded steel. Vashdor's talons scraped against the deck as he staggered back, his ocular implants cycling through frantic diagnostics. This is impossible, he hissed. The ship's architecture doesn't support harmonic modulation of this magnitude, but the ship did not care for his calculations. It sang anyway. Colonel Webb stood motionless at the center of the bridge, her hands loose at her sides. Her eyes were half-lidded, her breathing slow. Around her, the human crew mirrored her stillness. Not frozen, but waiting. As if listening to a voice only they could hear. Foster's lips moved silently, shaping words Draltal's translators refused to parse. The Krixis probes circling the Iron Resolve shuddered. Their scans, once razor-precise, now returned garbled nonsense. Images stretched like taffy, thermal readings that flickered between absolute zero and supernova heat. One by one, their targeting arrays misfired, their guidance systems collapsing into recursive loops of corrupted data. Draltal's secondary heart pounded. He had seen human ships before. He had studied their designs, their crude but effective armor, their reckless reliance on kinetics over energy weapons. But this was not a ship. It was a lung, breathing in the dark, and the humans were its heartbeat. Vashdor's voice cut through the haze of Draltal's racing thoughts. "Commander, their neural activity." "Look." Draltal's implants flared as they synced with the scientist's feed. The human's biometrics spilled across his vision, and his blood turned to ice. Their brainwaves were synchronized. Not loosely, not in the way of soldiers falling into rhythm during combat. Perfectly, every human aboard pulsed with the same neural frequency, their minds locked into a single seamless pattern. No Dralethian hive mind achieved such unity without decades of synaptic conditioning. Yet the humans had done it in moments, without implants, without augmentation, with nothing but will. Webb's voice, when she spoke, was soft. "You asked how we survived the long dark." She turned her palm upward, as if offering something invisible. "We didn't." A flicker of movement at the edges of Draltal's vision. The iron resolve's hull plating rippled, not a mechanical adjustment. A shiver like the twitch of a predator's flank before the pounce. Foster grinned. "We brought it with us." The Krixis probes died then, not in explosions, not in showers of sparks. They simply stopped. Their systems eroding like sandcastles in a tide. One moment they were there, sleek and lethal, their orange, red plasma cores pulsing with menace. The next, they were dark, empty. Draltal's implants shrieked a warning as the iron resolve's song twisted. Deeper now, heavier, a soundless pressure building in the marrow of his bones. The humans hadn't just harmonized with their ship. They had infected it, and it was waking up. Vashdor stumbled back, his voice raw with something Draltal had never heard from him before. "Commander, their ship isn't singing." The scientist's claws dug into his own forearm, drawing molten copper blood. "It's laughing." And in the silence between stars, the dark laughed back. Section Fey. The silent war, the command deck of the Iron Resolve, had become a cathedral of dread. Draltal's secondary eyelids flickered shut, then open again as if the act might reset the nightmare unfolding before him. The humans stood motionless at their stations. Colonel Webb with her hands resting lightly on the tactical console. Captain Foster's fingers hovering above the weapons array. No orders were spoken, no signals passed between them. Yet the ship moved, its massive bulk shifting with eerie precision, its segmented armor plates sliding apart to reveal weapon ports that pulsed with an unfamiliar blue-white energy. The Dralethian commander's neural feed spat static. His implants, forged in the molten cores of his homeworld's forges, had never failed him. Now they convulsed with corrupted data. Half-formed warnings, distorted schematics, and beneath it all, a presence. Something vast, something hungry. Vashdor's voice cut through the haze, his vocal cords strained to breaking. Their synchronization isn't mechanical. It's a wet, clicking pause. Biological. Draltal turned, his armored carapace scraping against itself. The scientist's normally immaculate copper-plated instruments lay scattered across the deck, their readouts spiraling into nonsense. Vashdor's claws trembled as he gestured to the main display, where the last of the Krixis probes floated lifeless. "Look at the energy signatures." The data unfurled like a slow-motion detonation. The probes hadn't been destroyed. Their systems hadn't been overloaded or hacked. They had been consumed, tendrils of something, not code, not radiation, but a hybrid of both, had slithered into their cores and eaten them from within, leaving hollow shells adrift in the void. The humans called it resonance warfare, a poetic term for a horror Draltal's language lacked words to describe. Webb finally moved, rolling her shoulders in a gesture that was almost casual. "You wanted to see how we fight," she said, her voice calm. "This is how." Foster's grin hadn't faded. If anything, it had sharpened. The Iron Resolve's engines flared, not with the familiar orange, red fury of Dralethian drives, but with a cold electric blue. The ship didn't accelerate. It unfolded, its massive bulk displacing space like a predator emerging from shadow. Draltal's tactical display lit up with fresh contacts. A Krixis battle group, emerging from the system's debris field. 6 destroyers, their angular hulls bristling with plasma lances, their commanders no doubt confident in their prey's helplessness. They didn't understand, no one did. The humans hadn't just integrated with their ship. They had infected it with something older than their civilization, something buried deep in their DNA. The same relentless, adaptive malice that had dragged them from caves to the stars in the blink of a cosmic eye. The Iron Resolve's weapons locked on. No roaring cannons, no blinding energy surges, just the ship's resonance field expanding like a slow breath, brushing against the Krixis vessels. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then the first destroyer's engine stuttered. Its shields flickered, not failing but twisting, their frequency warping into something unrecognizable. The second ship's weapon arrays misfired, plasma bolts turning inward, carving molten scars across its own hull. The third simply stopped, its lights dimmed, its systems froze. By the time the fourth ship began to scream, actual audible screams rippling across comm channels as its crew realized what was happening, Draltal understood. This wasn't warfare, it was propagation. The humans had weaponized their own evolutionary imperative, the same stubborn refusal to die that had let them endure ice ages, plagues, and the vacuum of space. And now, through some unholy fusion of biology and machine, they had given that will to their ship. The Iron Resolve wasn't just fighting. It was teaching the universe a lesson. Vashdor made a sound like a dying machine. They don't just adapt, he whispered. They make everything else adapt to them. Draltal's claws dug into the command console, molten copper welling beneath them. The last Krixis ship detonated, not from enemy fire, but from its own panicked scuttling charges, a final, desperate act of denial. In the aftermath, the Iron Resolve hummed, low and satisfied. Foster exhaled. "Well," he said, cracking his knuckles, "that's one way to say hello." And in the silence between stars, the dark laughed back. The molten glow of Dralethian command consoles pulsed in time with Draltal's racing hearts. The scent of scorched metal and ionized plasma clung to the air, thick as blood. Before him, the holographic wreckage of the Krixis fleet spun in slow, mocking pirouettes, twisted husks of once proud warships, their angular forms now little more than cosmic debris. And at the center of it all, the Iron Resolve. It hung there silent and terrible, its scarred hull drinking in the starlight. Draltal's secondary eyelids flicked shut, then open again as if the act might cleanse the sight from his mind. It didn't. The human warship was no mere vessel. It was a statement, carved in steel and written in fire. Vashdor's talons tapped a frenetic rhythm against his data slate, the sound like a dying insect's last spasms. His cranial vents flared, expelling heat in short, ragged bursts. Theoretical models suggested a fey chance of human victory, he muttered, more to himself than to Draltal. The variables were accounted for. The calculations were flawless. Draltal didn't answer. The calculations had been flawless. For a war fought by civilized beings, humans had never been civilized. Behind them, the bridge crew moved like creatures in a dream, their movements sluggish with shock. The orange-red glow of the Dralethian instrumentation painted their armored forms in hues of molten metal, turning them into statues of living bronze. None spoke, none dared. A chime sounded, soft, almost apologetic. Draltal's crest stiffened. The humans were hailing them. For a long moment, he considered ignoring it. Let the silence stretch, let them wonder. But curiosity was a claw in his gut, twisting deeper with every passing second. With a gesture that felt heavier than it should have, he opened the channel. Colonel Teyla Webb's face filled the screen. She looked unremarkable. No cranial ridges, no bioluminescent patterning, no armored plating, just flesh, stretched over bone, her dark eyes sharp as monomolecular blades, a predator's eyes. "Commander Draltal," she said, her voice calm, almost conversational. "I believe we have your attention now." Draltal's claws flexed. The humans had just annihilated a Krixis battle group with a ship that had no right to exist, and she spoke as if discussing the weather. "You fight like beasts," he said, the words scraping free of his throat. Webb smiled. "It wasn't a pleasant expression, no," she corrected. "Beasts fight for survival. We fight for forever." The screen flickered, and another image overlaid Webb's, a data stream, raw and unfiltered. Ship schematics, battle logs, medical reports. Draltal's breath caught. The Iron Resolve wasn't just a warship, it was a graveyard. Every scar on its hull, every patched breach, every scorch mark, each one told a story. A battle survived, a lesson learned, a weakness purged. The humans hadn't just built their vessel, they had grown it, feeding it on conflict, letting it evolve through sheer, bloody persistence. And then he saw the crew manifests. Some of them stretched back centuries. Vashdor made a sound like a power conduit overloading. "They don't retire their ships," he whispered. "They don't even retire their dead." Draltal understood. Then the Iron Resolve wasn't just metal and circuitry. It was a legacy, a thing of bone and memory and stubborn, unyielding will. Every human who had ever served aboard it was still there, in the steel, in the code, in the very air they breathed. The ship wasn't just alive, it was haunted. Webb's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "You wanted to study us, Commander, to measure our worth. So here's your lesson." She leaned forward, her gaze boring into him. "We don't break, we don't surrender, and we don't forget." The transmission ended, leaving only the hum of the Iron Resolve's engines, a sound like a heartbeat, steady and inexorable. Draltal exhaled, long and slow. The weight of forever pressed down on him, heavy as a dying star. The humans had given them shelter, and in return, they had given the galaxy a truth it could never unlearn. Section Fe. The choice, the silence in the Dralethian command chamber was thick enough to choke on. Draltal stood motionless before the holographic projection of the Iron Resolve, its scarred hull still flickering in the dim orange glow of the chamber's molten core lighting. The data streams had stopped, the scans had finished, and yet the ship loomed larger in his mind than it ever had on the tactical displays. "We don't break, we don't surrender, and we don't forget." Webb's words coiled around his thoughts like barbed wire. He had spent cycles studying human warfare, their chaotic tactics, their reckless adaptability, but nothing in the archives had prepared him for this. The Iron Resolve wasn't just a vessel. It was a monument, a living, breathing testament to something the Dralethian military doctrine had no name for. Vashdor's claws clicked against the console as he reviewed the scans again, his copper-plated cranial ridges twitching in barely suppressed agitation. The scientist had spent his career dissecting the weaknesses of lesser species, but now his voice carried the brittle edge of something unfamiliar. Their neural archives. It's not just data storage, it's integration. Draltal didn't need to ask what he meant. The humans hadn't merely recorded the memories of their dead, they had woven them into the ship systems, every battle, every loss, every last defiant breath, etched into the Iron Resolve's very bones. The vessel didn't just remember its fallen, it fought with them. A low chime echoed through the chamber as the tactical display updated. The Iron Resolve's weapon signatures pulsed ominously, a slow, rhythmic thrum like the beating of some great mechanical heart. Railgun capacitors hummed at phase charge, plasma conduits glowed white, hot beneath armored plating, and deeper still, buried in the ship's core, something darker stirred, a resonance the Dralethian scanners couldn't fully decipher. "What is that?" Draltal finally asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Vashdor hesitated. "Unknown, but it's responding to us." A cold ripple passed through Draltal's exoskeleton. The humans had warned them. They had offered shelter, yes, but they had also shown their teeth. The Iron Resolve wasn't just a warship, it was a promise, and promises in human history were written in blood. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Colonel Teyla Webb watched the Dralethian vessel through the reinforced viewport, her reflection a ghostly imprint against the stars. The alien ship hung there, angular and brutal, its forge, like energy signatures painting the void in hues of molten copper and burning crimson. Beautiful in its way, deadly. In every other, Captain Foster stood beside her, his fingers resting lightly on the tactical console. He didn't need to speak. The tension in his shoulders said enough. They're deciding, Webb thought, whether we're worth the risk. She almost smiled. The Dralethians had come to measure humanity's strength, to weigh their worth against the cold calculus of galactic survival. But they hadn't accounted for the weight of memory, for the way a soldier's last stand could outlive them, could fuel the ones who came after. The Iron Resolve shuddered faintly around them, a deep subsonic tremor that vibrated through the deck plating. Somewhere in its labyrinthine depths, the archived consciousnesses of 100 dead warriors stirred, their presence a silent chorus at Webb's back. She didn't turn to look. She didn't need to. They were with her. They were always with her. Draltal exhaled, long and slow, the heat of the command chamber pressing against his carapace like a physical weight. The choice before him was clear. The humans were unpredictable. Dangerous, they carried their dead like weapons and bled defiance like a birthright. But they had also offered shelter. And that, perhaps, was the most terrifying thing of all. "Stand down the weapons," he said at last, the words heavy with the weight of something he didn't yet understand. "Open a channel." Vashdor's spines flared in shock. "You cannot be," the scientist hesitated, then obeyed. As the calm link hissed to life, Draltal straightened, his mandibles tightening with something that might have been respect. The humans had given them a lesson. Now, it was time to learn. Section Fe. The fracture, the comm channel hissed, like a dying star, the static between their fleets thick with unspoken tension. Draltal could feel the weight of his command carapace pressing into his thoracic plates, not from the gravity, but from the sheer impossibility of the moment. Before him, the holographic projection of the human commander flickered into existence. Colonel Teyla Webb stood with her spine straight, her uniform singed from battle, but her eyes burning with the same unbroken fire that had seared itself into Dralethian memory. Behind her, the dim lighting of her ship's bridge revealed the silhouettes of her crew, some wounded, some standing with arms crossed, all watching, waiting. Draltal had expected fear, submission. The natural order of things demanded it. Lesser species bent when faced with the might of the Dralethian forge fleet. Instead, Webb's lips curled into something that wasn't a smile. It was a challenge. Vashdor's claws twitched at his side, the scientist's bioluminescent veins pulsing in agitated crimson. "This is a mistake," he hissed, subvocalizing through their neural link. "Their defiance is a disease. Containment is the only." Draltal silenced him with a single pulse of command. Frequency, his own thoughts churned, molten and heavy. The humans had done the impossible, not just surviving the engagement, but adapting mid-battle. Their ships moved like living things, their tactics shifting faster than Dralethian targeting algorithms could compensate. And then there was the other thing, the way they carried them, the way they used them. Draltal had seen warriors honor their fallen. He had seen monuments built from the bones of heroes. But this was different. The humans didn't just remember, they armed themselves with memory. Their grief wasn't a weakness, it was fuel. And now they had offered shelter. The realization slithered through his neural pathways like a serpent. The humans had every reason to let them burn. The Dralethian fleet had come as conquerors, their forge, cores blazing with the promise of annihilation. Yet when the cosmic storm had erupted from the system star, a solar flare of such magnitude that even Dralethian shielding faltered. Webb had opened her ship's docking bays. To enemies, Draltals, mandibles, tightened. Galactic doctrine had no protocols for this. There was no tactical advantage in mercy. No logic. The human commander spoke first. "You've got 3 minutes before that radiation front hits," Webb said, her voice stripped of anything resembling plea or negotiation. "Your shields won't hold. Ours will. A lie? A trap?" Dralethian tactical subroutines screamed warnings. Threat assessments spiraling. But Draltal's gaze locked onto the flickering hologram of Webb's face. The way her jaw set. The way her fingers didn't so much as twitch toward her sidearm. She wasn't afraid, and that terrified him more than any weapon. Behind her, a human soldier, Foster, his insignia marked him, leaned in, murmuring something too low for the comm to catch. Webb didn't react, but something in the set of her shoulders shifted. Draltal recognized it instantly. Pack cohesion. The humans moved as a unit. Thought as a unit. Fought as a unit. No hive. Mind, no neural links. Just something deeper. Something primal. Vashdor's spines rattled. They're stalling. The storm is a ruse. Draltal's decision crystallized. "Prepare for docking," he commanded. The order reverberating through the fleet's neural net. The shockwave of disbelief from his officers was almost physical. Webb's hologram flickered again. But this time, Draltal swore he saw something in her eyes. Not triumph. Not even pity. Recognition. Then the channel cut. The Dralethian fleet moved. Their massive forge. Ships turning like wounded leviathans toward the human vessels. The storm loomed behind them, a wall of starfire and death. And as the first docking clamps engaged, Draltal realized the truth. This wasn't surrender. This was something far worse. They had just let the humans save them, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. Section. Fey. Forever. Defined. The docking clamps hissed as they sealed, a sound like the last breath of a dying world. Draltal stood motionless on the command deck, his copper-plated claws digging into the railing. The human ships, small, battered things that should have been crushed under the weight of Dralethian might, now loomed in the viewports like silent predators. Their hulls were scorched, their armor pitted from the storm, yet they held. They always held. Vashdor's spines twitched violently, his neural tendrils flickering with agitated energy. "This is a mistake." He pulsed through the fleet. Net, the words laced with something Draltal had never heard from him before. The Dralethian commander didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the docking umbilical, where the first human figures were emerging. They moved wrong, not with the mechanical precision of Dralethian soldiers, nor the fluid grace of the other galactic species. They lumbered, their movements heavy with fatigue, their armor cracked and leaking atmosphere. Yet they came forward anyway, their weapons slung, their hands open. Colonel Webb led them. Her faceplate was fractured, her visor a spiderweb of stress fractures, but her eyes, those eyes, burned with the same quiet intensity as before. She stopped just inside the threshold, her boots leaving smears of carbon, scored alloy on the pristine deck. The Dralethian honor guard tensed, their plasma casters humming to life. Webb didn't flinch. She reached up, unsealed her helmet, and let it drop. The air on a Dralethian warship was thick with forge, fumes, heavy with the scent of molten metal and ionized plasma. It should have choked her. It would have choked any other species. She inhaled deeply, then she smiled. Draltal's secondary heart stuttered. Behind her, more humans were flooding in, not as conquerors, not as supplicants, but as kin. They moved among the Dralethian crew with an ease that defied logic, patching wounds, sharing rations, pressing makeshift seals over ruptured conduits. One of them, Captain Foster, his name pulsed through the neural net, knelt beside a wounded Dralethian engineer, his hands moving with practiced precision as he reset a fractured coolant line. The engineer stared at him, his spines flared in confusion. Why? The engineer pulsed, the question echoing through the shared network. Foster didn't have a neural link. He couldn't hear it, but he answered anyway. Because you needed help, he said, his voice rough through his damaged vocoder. And that was all. No grand speeches. No demands for tribute, just that. Vashdor staggered back, his tendrils flickering wildly. This isn't possible. Their biochemistry, their neural patterns, they should be broken by now. The radiation, the stress. Draltal finally turned to him. You were wrong. He pulsed, the words heavy with the weight of revelation. They were never weak. Outside, the storm raged. The human ships, those fragile, stubborn things, had formed a barrier between the Dralethian fleet and the Starfire, their shields interlocking like the scales of some ancient beast. They were burning, dying, and they held, because that was what humans did. Webb stepped forward, her gaze locking with Draltal's. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The truth was in the silence. The Dralethians had given them shelter. The humans had given them forever. And nothing would ever be the same. Section Fe. Aftermath. The storm died. Not in surrender, not in defeat, but in exhaustion. Its fury spent against the unyielding defiance of human shields. The Starfire's wrath receded, its tendrils of plasma curling back into the void like a wounded beast retreating to lick its wounds. Silence settled over the battlefield, thick and unnatural, broken only by the groans of dying ships and the crackle of dissipating energy. Vashdor's command spire was a ruin. Half its systems were dark, the others flickering erratically, casting jagged shadows across the fractured consoles. His warriors stood frozen, their armor scorched, their weapons limp at their sides. They had expected annihilation. They had expected victory. They had not expected this. Draltal moved first. His steps were slow, deliberate, his claws clicking against the deck as he approached the viewport. Outside, the human fleet hung in the void. What remained of it? Their ships were blackened husks, their shields collapsed, their hulls pitted and molten. Some had been torn apart entirely, their wreckage drifting in lazy, broken arcs. Life signs flickered among the debris, escape pods, emergency beacons. The humans were still there, clinging to survival with the same stubborn tenacity that had carried them through the storm. Vashdor's voice was hollow. They should be dead. Draltal didn't answer. He didn't need to. The evidence was before them, undeniable. The humans had done the impossible, not through superior technology, not through some hidden advantage, but because they had chosen to. On the ruined bridge of the Indomitable, Webb exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the cracked visor of her helmet. Around her, the surviving crew worked in silence, their movements sluggish with exhaustion, their hands steady, despite the tremors of pain. One by one, the comms crackled to life. Status reports from the fleet, damage assessments, casualty counts. She closed her eyes. They had lost. And they had won. A chime sounded, an incoming transmission, not from the fleet, from the Dralethians. Draltal's face filled the screen, his crimson eyes burning with something unfamiliar. Fear. Human, he pulsed. Your people have done what no other species has dared. You have defied the stars themselves. Webb smiled. It was a tired thing, worn at the edges, but it held. Yeah, she said. We do that. And in that moment, the galaxy shifted. The Dralethians would never look at humanity the same way again, and neither would the humans.